I just want to point him out to you again because the only picture I have of James is here. Will you see him?
Is that him right there?
Yeah, there's James. There's James. And then we have a little picture here, but it isn't such a good picture. Anyway, you do know who he is, so.
Yes.
But many of your children probably, yeah, here he is. Of course, don't know because he's gone now. He died. James died. Let's see, James died in 1966. So as I was saying to you, he was only, what, 41 years old when he died. And he died of heart failure. He died in his sleep, though, so it makes it real easy death. It wasn't like some of those heart failure deaths are. Anyway, James left home because my mother just simply could not put up with him anymore. Because he was doing things that weren't really right. And so my mother made him leave home, but he went to Ben, where we all went when we left home. We went to Ben. The thing that happened to James, and I think happened to Tandy and Jack too, and happened to all of us actually, was when Dolphus and nephew did so well, and when they got out of college, they were treated so shabbily, that we all just said, why go to school? You know, why try to make it? Why try to be anything? The main thing is to get out of Colorado Springs. This is the way we all felt. I think maybe that's the reason that Tandy went to Howard. I don't know, but I just think maybe it was. But I do know that happened to Jack, and it happened to James, and it sure happened to Lulu. Lulu just refused to stay in Colorado Springs. And when I was in junior high school, I was almost ready to leave Colorado Springs also, but I'll get to that. I think that had something to do with his kind of rebellion. I don't know. He was only 14 years old when my father went blind. That didn't help either. And Jack was only 16, and Tandy was only 18. So you see, they were pretty young when Father, who was really the rock of Gibraltar in our family, you know, went blind and was unable to be the kind of father that he had been. He was unable to be the breadwinner. So James was too young to try to take over a business or even try to help with the business like that. And he didn't do some of the things that he should have done. He did some wrong things. So Mama said, look here, you know, this is my bad one, he can go. And I don't blame her. She had nothing else to say. She's nothing else she could do. And so he went to Ben, and he worked with Ben a long time. And he was very, very good at driving trucks and trailers and tractors and things like that because he was mechanically inclined, as I told you. And so I guess he left Ben because you don't stay with Ben forever. You go on and do what you have to do yourself. And Ben will introduce you as well as he can, and then you go ahead and make your own way. And then he began to wander around all over the place. And then he, somewhere or other, he picked up this drinking habit, and he became an alcoholic. He did, though, try to take care of himself later on. He met a good one. Her name was Lily. And he and Lily were married, and she helped him a lot. Because I saw him in San Diego when my son and I came out here to live. And I stopped for a minute to see them. He had already written a couple of times that he was doing better because he joined AAA, you see. But this is something you have to do yourself. You can't, nobody can take care of an addiction for you. And I learned it then. I've known it, read a lot of literature about it. That you don't get rid of an addiction unless you want to get rid of it yourself. And something has got to make you get rid of it. So maybe it was the life he had lived. Maybe it was Lily, that was his wife's name. Or it could have been a number of things. Anyway, he went to AAA, and he told me about that. And when I saw them in San Diego, he was doing pretty well because he was the manager. He and his wife were managing this great big apartment complex called the Saxony Arms. And it had a lovely swimming pool, you know, in the center of it. You know, what am I saying? One of those things. And Percy was a good swimmer. He was a little boy, but he was a really good swimmer. So, and I was trying to learn how to swim. So we had a lot of fun in that swimming pool. We weren't there for long, just a few hours. I think we left Los Angeles and went down to see him and then came on up here. I think that's the way it was. Anyhow, he had, as far as I'm concerned, had conquered his addiction. He had also decided to go back to school, so I know he had. And he thought he didn't have a high school diploma, but he had one. I mean to say he had done enough work to have one. He had enough credits because he sent back to Colorado Springs and found out that he, as far as they were concerned, he was a graduate. So he started junior college in San Diego. He also was a Mason. He had to become a Mason. And he also was a treasurer or secretary treasurer of the Baptist church he went to. He went to church. So you see, he was, I think he conquered that all right. And so we came on up here. But he was going to take a job up here in Northern California, managing some more apartments because the Saxony Arms was sold. But he died. He died in his sleep. So I guess the good Lord had decided he'd had enough trouble and he had done real well. It was time for him to come home, I suppose. But anyway, James, as far as I am concerned, I have a very positive feeling about the way his life ended because he was recovered and he had done this by himself. So I think I told you that, Welvin, because I wanted you to understand that everything isn't right with everything is not always all right with any family. Families always have weak spots in them.
It was 51, not 41.
51?
Yeah.
Okay, he was 51.
Is that right?
Well,
yeah, 66,
I made a mistake.
15, that's all right, 51. Because
15, yeah, 51. Ah.
That's all right.
Thank you. That's that.
I'm glad.
I'm ashamed of myself.
I'm glad he was 51 because I remember him, and when I saw him, he was between 35 and 40.
He was 51.
Because I saw him in the 50s.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you can see my family. None of them lasted too long. None of us lasted too long.
But yes, you did.
Effie's the oldest one.
Hey.
But I know people that live 90 and 100 years. Not my family don't.
But then 100 years ago, black people didn't live to be 40.
I do know.
Didn't,
I do know.
I mean,
my father only lasted to be 66. So
that's twice as long as they during up until 1860.
I understand.
It was like 20, 25, 30.
Anyway, he left us on a very, I think, upbeat note. He was making his whole life over, and I don't know what he would have done. But he did do this at this junior college he went to. He was taking graphic arts, and he has this achievement award. I don't know if you can read it because it's a copy, but you can see where it's James Stroud.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you can. It's what he graduated, but it was in graphic arts. You may be able to see that.
And this is his work?
And that's his work. And I don't know if that's a maybe this might be a better picture of it. I don't know which one is clearest. This may be clearer. I think that's a little clearer. Okay?
He did that work.
Yeah, he was, I say he was good. He was good. Graphics.
That's good work.
Yeah. So you see, he was changing his whole life around, and too bad that he had to go, but it was God's time, so he left us. Now, any questions about James? Otherwise, we go on to the next one. And the next one is your daddy, okay? Now, you may remember this.
Yes, I'm looking for copies of these, the originals. Do you have a copy of that?
No, I don't know where Lulu got those.
She has them.
She has them. It's in, she would tell you.
Yeah.
She would tell you. That is when they were married in 1932. Your mother and your father. This is Bernice Williams, and this is Tandy Stroud, and they were married. In 1932, I guess Tandy was how old? 1932. He was born in 1911. 21.
2020.
1911 and 32 is 21.
21.
11, 32. Come on, one.
Yeah.
21. He was 21. I don't think Bernice was about 16 or 17. 16. So she was mighty young. They were both young to be married, but mighty young. And this is where they were in 1991. Tandy's gone now.
Yeah.
Bernice is still here. But it's a long, long, long marriage. Long marriage.
It is.
Long marriage. Nowadays, people just don't do that, but they did. Okay. She was a very pretty girl. You can see that. She's a beauty. Okay. Tiny wasn't too bad, although he's got that Stroud forehead. For we don't have any hair on our foreheads. Because there's too much brain up there, Father said. I don't have any hair on my forehead. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. So I thank you very much for this.
Oh.
This is Tandy's thoughts and writings, because this is what guided me on what I'm going to say about Tandy. Now, I'm not going to take time to read his writings, because people can get those and read them. But I am going to read one poem that I want to read, okay? He has poetry. I guess we are all poets. I guess all of us were. Now, please tell me where that is. Here it is. This is what I think I got the most from this, out of all of the stuff. I mean, this is the thing that caught my eye, the Only a Kitten. I like these short ones, especially to read for this. But he says, only a kitten. Early in the morning, coming home from work, I saw a skinny young dead cat. Under her tail was a half-born kitten. That fatal struggle to bring new life. That too young, too weak female cat. Victim of the vicious tomcat, fighting and killing for his pleasure. Unconcerned about what happens to his seed. Black teenagers. Tomcats instead of men. Without men, black men we will perish in the United States of America. Without men, black men, we will perish in the USA. That I thought was a good poem. I really did. And it had something to say. It was a message. Now, I'm going to simply read this resume because, in the first place, there are a lot of things in here I really didn't know. And I'm glad I got a chance to find them out. This is one thing this whole thing is giving to me, and finding out things about my own brothers and sisters that I really didn't know. I hadn't read all Dolphus's writings before, you know? So here we go. He was born May 14th, 1911 in Colorado Springs. He was the first child born in Colorado that my mother and my father had, okay? And he graduated from Colorado Springs High School. I did not know he had the second highest grades in the class. So I knew he was very, very smart. Tandy was smarter than any of us. We all knew that. He was smarter than Dolphus or any of the first of us. He received scholarships to Colorado College and Howard University in math. Now, he went to Howard, as I said. I believe that's the reason he went there instead of going to Colorado College, because our experience at Colorado College had been so terrible, you know, with Effie and Dolphus. So he was at Howard University from 1920 to 29, and he came back. He came back, I suspect, because he doesn't say that, but I suspect he came back because money is hard to get when you're not at home. And if you have to support yourself to buy your own room and board and then go to school, it's really not easy. I had to do that, and I know what it is. In those days, usually your scholarships were just for tuition.
Turn it off a minute. I know exactly why he... in Washington, D.C. in 1928, there was total racial segregation.
Oh,
I was so thrilled to be with hundreds of blacks, but I had learned to fear and distrust, in fact, to look down on anything all black. My little cash took care of my tuition, books, etc. At 17, in little Colorado Springs, working on the ash truck with my dad and brothers, working as a caddy on the golf course, mowing lawns, and firing furnaces was the meager experience I had had. As far as social contacts, they were limited in Colorado Springs with a total population of black population of 300. I was not ready for college. I was too sheltered to know how to get along. My academic book knowledge was superior. The chemistry and algebra I took at Howard was a review of what I had in high school. The course in engineering drawing was a complete mystery. My excellence in chemistry and algebra got me a scholarship for my next semester. I did well in the marathon from Baltimore to Washington, D.C., and was on the way to better acceptance. I had a job in the dining hall, a room in the dormitory, and an opportunity to join a group planning to go north to wait tables through the summer and earn next year's tuition. Mama had sent me the $20 I lacked to complete my enrollment. Walking up Georgia Avenue on my way to the campus, I met a black woman clothed in rags, very emaciated and weak. She had just recovered from a sick bell. Did I have a spare quarter? I gave her the $20 bill. I decided to drop out the spring quarter and hitchhike to Chicago to visit my older brother Ben, who had a moving business there. Ben was doing a good business, but I wanted to go on to college, so I returned to Colorado Springs. I had applied for the $1,000 National Elks Scholarship while in Washington, D.C. I was the first recipient west of the Mississippi River. In Colorado College at Colorado, I was the oldest boy at home. Dolphus had married. Ben was in Chicago. My dad was going flying. There were 6 younger than I. I returned the $1,000 and went to work on the ash truck for Mama.
But then why didn't he stay on the ash truck for Mama? Because he didn't.
He didn't, huh?
No.
Then he went off and married my wife, my mother.
That's exactly what. So.
But that's a touching. I mean, that's a touching story.
That's a real touching story.
But it's not all too valid.
Well, wait a minute. We got to put something on.
He's got another paragraph there about he sought the Lord and then whatever.
Yeah.
But that's giving away his $20. I felt, you know,
and not doing the $1,000.
And well, his mother sending him $20, that was a sacrifice on her part.
Sure, but then she'd been sacrificing on her.
For him to go to school, and he ends up giving it to this woman in rags, which is a nice, generous thing to do, but it doesn't help him out or help me out as his son if he didn't. Yeah, you know.
Wanted him to finish college.
That's a sad story.
So how shall I put this on tape? Let me see.
You don't have to.
I'm going to put it on that he didn't have enough money to continue. That's what I'm going to put on it. He felt that he needed to come home and help us.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had that. So I don't. Are you ready to go? Shall I go ahead? Okay. So Welvin, I don't really know exactly what led Patty to come home, but I have the feeling, even after I see this and hear this story, I have the feeling that what I said in the first place was more or less right. When you're away from home and you're young, and you're trying to go to school, and you have never been away from home before, and that was a very different experience to go to an all-black school from the environment we had to live in Colorado Springs. That you do need to have some kind of a buffer, and money is one of the best buffers you can have. It's pretty hard to be poor if you go into a place like Howard University. So, although Mama did try to help him, you told me she sent him $20 to try to help him to get his enrollment money. I think that he just felt like he wanted to go home. And he went to Ben, first of all, as you said, and he worked with Ben a while. All of us worked with Ben, believe me, I did too. We all did. He was a great second daddy. So, and then he went home, and that was his excuse, I think. Well, I don't know. I can't think what Tandy said. But like he said, he went home to help Mama because he had a guilt feeling. Ben had a guilt feeling too. I think Dolphus had a guilt feeling too, because Mama had 6 little kids at home. When Father went blind, Bobby was only 6 years old. You know, she was just a baby. So, baby. But when he came home, he did work with Mama for a little while. And Mama could not run that thing by herself, and neither could Tandy run it by himself either. It took all of those guys. And Jack and James were not old enough to be too much help. Well, Tandy was awful young himself, my goodness. You don't take on a responsibility like that of all of us kids that were too young to be anything but just, you know, no man to help you, no man to direct you, no grown man to direct you. So what happened was, Mama sold him a truck, and Tandy, she did this after Tandy got married. Tandy did get married. Well, of course, he fell in love, I guess, with Bernice. That helped, you know, that had something to do with it. Because when you fall in love with somebody, or you want to marry somebody, it's pretty hard to worry about another family that's not your own family, And you've got older brothers, and they've got their own families and their own lives. He had a right to have his own life. But really, when my father went blind, it hurt every one of us who came on later, some way or other. So, and it hurt the older ones too. It was too bad, but that's what happens in life. Anyway, he did come home. And anyway, he did then become a member of the Church of God in Christ. And he did marry Bernice, who was a very lovely girl. She was a good-looking thing. And they started out. So Mama then sold Tandy a truck. Mama had then, at that time, I guess she had 2 left. I don't know what happened. I think the first one she sold 2. And then Tandy got 1 truck, and then I think she had 2 left. I think that's the way it was. She might have sold 1 to Dolphus too, I'm not sure. But she had to sell that business, and she did. Because we tried to run it with just Jack and James, and the 2 trucks. And of course James, you know, didn't do the right thing. And Jack tried to do it by himself. And there's an old letter that I have that was in Ben's things, where Jack wrote to Ben and asked him to come home and help him. And Ben didn't do it. So see what I'm trying to say. Ben had his own business going in Chicago, and he couldn't very well do it. Jack said, I've got this going, and I've got this going, and I need some help, and so why don't you think about coming home and helping? And Ben didn't do it. So Jack kind of gave up too. And I don't blame Jack. And I don't blame James. I don't blame any of them. It was not their family. But the point is, Mama had 4 little girls there. Lula, Rosa, Nina, and Bobby. Nina, Rosa, and Bobby left. And so Jack went on. He stayed in, well, that's when I talk about Jack. So I don't want to talk about him right now. So Tandy and Bernice got married. But Tandy still couldn't do very much working on those ash trucks by himself to take care of his growing family, because it wasn't too long before they started having children too. Although I think it was a couple of years or so before they started having children. But they were both awfully young. And he was trying to make it hauling ashes. But there's something about it, when you have the ability to do something better, when you have that ability, you don't want to stay hauling those dirty ashes for the rest of your life. And Colorado Springs did not hold hope for us. I did not want to stay as a maid the rest of my life. And that's the reason that drove me out of Colorado Springs up to school. None of us wanted to continue to do this hard work. They were all too young. My brothers were all too young to see my father's vision. Because his vision was not to haul ashes all your life. His business was to have a business and hire people to do the dirty work and find ways not to have such dirty work. I could talk about that a long time, and it won't do any good. I won't get through with the rest. So at any rate, let's get back to this resume. I'll get all off. I won't know where I am. Here.
It's right.
Yeah, all right.
There.
All right. That's because it's a long one. So anyway, he came on out to California. Well, let's see. He talks about, this is education. I better do it as the resume says, Welvin, because otherwise I might get confused. Because he didn't go to San Francisco State College right then. He had to come to California first. So, let's just do it like your resume has it. This was his education. At 1944, he was in California, and he took courses at San Francisco State College in history and Spanish. And then he attended Hayward State College in 1962. 1974, he was at Jackson State College doing agricultural drafting, business, and law. That's Mississippi, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, he went to Mississippi. I'll talk about that in a minute. In 1976, what, NCJC, what is that? Junior college? Horticulture, flower arranging, and landscaping. Because he and his wife particularly, Bernice was particularly good at horticulture. She could name almost any plant that there was, and she knew what to do with plants. In 1981, he was at Peralta College in Oakland doing horticulture, physical education, and gerontology. All right, now then we go back to his employment. He was self-employed in trucking in 1930 to 35, and father went blind. Father went blind in 1930. All right. He was 1935 to 1937. He was recreational leader in the WPA. He worked on WPA. My brother Dolphus worked on CCC. He was CCC camp. I worked on NYA. I guess those are the ones of us who took advantage of those or had the advantage of those programs during the Deep Depression that we were in. And I think those of you who remember, probably very few of you do, but that's one of the things that Franklin D. Roosevelt did as President of the United States, was to start these the ways that we could have jobs.
What are those initials stand?
Well, WP, Works Progress Administration. CCC is a Civilian Conservation Corporation, something like that. NYA's National Youth Administration. And PWA, Public Works Administration. All those alphabetically, what should I say? All those agencies were called by their alphabetical titles, I guess. I'm trying to say by their initials, initials of each word. And he established any number of them. Congress did with his pushing, so that he could get people to working in the United States again. Then he was, in 1942, he was postal clerk at the Colorado Springs Post Office. Now, in 1942, he was postal clerk. And my father, of course, couldn't get a job as a postal clerk. So that shows you the progress that had been made. Now, in 1944, he went to the United States Army. And he went to the United States Army, but they wouldn't accept him as a combat person because he had such a large family. So he spent the whole time in the United States working in the post office. But he still was, what do you call it? Well, anyway, he did join the Army.
He was a conscientious objector.
Well, he was in there. He was admitted, wasn't he?
Yeah, but he wanted to go in to carry the dead off the field.
Yeah.
And when he got to Colorado, when he got to San Francisco, and he heard that the Japanese were shooting the people who carried the dead off the field, he said, "I don't want to go," and he decided to get a job.
He got in the post office, but they weren't going to accept him as a combat veteran. Anyway, he told us he was in the United States Army. But all right, you're a child. You should know.
That's what he told me.
But that's nothing. My brother Jack, the reason he's an engineer today, I mean, he was there, was the same reason to stay out of that war. I can't blame them. But they just didn't. I don't blame them. I don't blame them at all. I wouldn't have wanted to be in the war either. I don't see why in the world women want to be combat personnel. I don't understand that. 1953 to 55, he was letter carrier at the Hayward Post Office. 1955 to 65, he was a real estate salesman, licensed, and then 57 to 60, he was an insurance salesman. I guess I better hang this together though some way. He left Colorado Springs and came out here to California because he just didn't see how he was going to make it and support his family, which was growing, and try to haul ashes and do the limited things that you were allowed to do in Colorado Springs. So he came out here, and he did do better as far as providing for his family is concerned, and as far as getting out of that kind of situation, because the opportunities were much greater out here at that time. There's no question about it. We all left home for the same kinds of reasons that he left home, because there was no opportunity at home for any of us. You know, start from Dolphus, clear on down. That's where start from Ben and go right down, and we all left. Now, community work. He came out here and he lived first in San Francisco, I believe. I may be wrong there. And he got what was it, 10 acres you guys had out there in Hayward?
Just 1 acre.
1 acre? Well, it looked like 10 acres to me when I came out
big.
1 acre of prime property, as far as I'm concerned, on a hill, Kelly Street in Hayward. And they had a beautiful home out there to live, to bring up his kids. His wife was very, very helpful. She worked hard too, and he did much better for his children out here, as far as physical needs are concerned, than he could have done in Colorado Springs. All right, so after he had stayed in Hayward for a long, long time, and his family had all grown up, or pretty much so, he and his wife went to Mississippi, and her family had a piece of property down there, and they lived there on that property until he died. And so you see things going on in Hayward, and then you see things going on in Mississippi in this resume. So I just wanted to give you this little background, and then I'll go ahead with his resume. Now this is the community work he did, which is quite impressive. A lot of this I did not know. In 1928 to 38, he was Boy Scout Master and Committee Man in Colorado Springs. I didn't know he was, yes I did, he was in Boy Scouting in Colorado Springs, yes. In 1932, he was representative to the Republican State Convention. That's true, I remember that. He made a speech. I can't remember what it was, but he made a speech that they were talking about. It was impressive. I remember in those days, all black people were Republicans. Just remember that. Until Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president. And then we all decided to be Democrats. Well, in 1932, he was representative to the Republican State Convention. 1937 to 38, he was High Y leader. Now this is what I remember. 1935 to 40, he was editor and publisher of the Voice of Colorado, which was a weekly newspaper. That was one of the newspapers that my Kimball distributed. 1937 to 1944, I didn't know this. He was state secretary of the Colorado Churches of God in Christ. 1948 to 52, he was Boy Scout Master. I didn't know that. And committee man in Hayward, California. 1950 to 1965, he was associate pastor of the Church of God in Christ. He was Sunday school superintendent and trustee. And 1960 to 62, he was executive secretary of the state Sunday school department. And then he was a state statistician for Northern California Churches of God in Christ. Again, you see the math is a natural in most of us. And 1968 to 73, he was pastor of the Hayward Church of God in Christ. Then 72, he was summer camp counselor in the Sierra Mountains of California. He was associate director. 1973 and 74, Sanderson's Farms. He was a manager of a chicken farm at Erata, Mississippi. And in 1974, he was Dean of Boys and Superintendent of Buildings and Grounds, Saints College, Lexington, Mississippi, under Dr. Mellery. 75-76, Associate Manager of a senior housing complex under Housing Authority in Denver, Colorado. And in 1976 to 77, he was evangelized in Colorado under Bishop William Odom. What does evangelize mean?
Missionary-like work.
I see. The same thing in California under Bishop Radell Stewart, and then he served in 1983 to 84. He served as president of the Board of Trustees at Cleaver Memorial Church of God in Christ in San Francisco. Served as president of the Board of Trustees. And then in 85, evangelized again in Mississippi under Superintendent Reuben McSwain, and he died, you see Tandy? 1993. So you can see how much community service he did and how much service to other people besides himself, besides doing his own job. And all the way through all of these, you're going to see mathematics. And I said when I started this, I said my father, I said I thought had this very, very high IQ. I didn't tell you that mathematics was just his whole thing. And I didn't tell you that one of the reasons I thought he had real genius was because of the fact that when some of these older brothers of mine went into their math and had a hard time, some maybe over some problems that they had to do in higher math, in algebra, even in trigonometry, my father was able to figure out what they ought to do, and he had never even had algebra, but he could actually help them with these higher math courses. And so right there, you know, I see this is a man that's awfully smart, and we all saw that. Now I'm going to let Tandy go. He's gone now, and the next one is Jack, who's also gone. Now Jack is here, but I have still better pictures of Jack. So we'll put these down. We'll leave this one over here because we will come back to it. Jack is the one And I think it's because he was born later than the others, who really got some opportunity. He was not as smart as Tandy or Dolphus, certainly not as smart as Tandy. And he knew it himself. But he did get an opportunity, and so he did something with that mathematical background that everybody has had who lived with father. So I'm going to try to be brief on this one. This is his resume. And I've read a lot already. I hate to read again. So before I read, let me just say some things about that. He was the one that was left at home, and everybody else was gone. All the rest of the boys were gone. And he tried to run the business, and he couldn't. And so he went to Bend 2 to get started. And but before he left, he finished, I think, 2 years at Colorado College. About the time he got to Ben's Espresso and was working, the war broke out, and Jack didn't want to go to the Army either, and he got right back in school, and he took math and science. Because you see, if you took math and science, these are the kinds of people that got deferred from the military, the students in school that were taking these subjects that were going to be very, very useful. Now, tell me, is this going to show very well? Because I have a bigger picture if that's not going to show well. That's not high enough, is it? I'll leave it like that. Okay. Does that show well? No. Or do you want a bigger picture? I've got a bigger one.
That's fine. You can set it down.
Okay. I'll let that. That's a good picture of it. So I'll let that one sit there. Now, this is the last job he had before he retired. So I'll try to read this to you. Now, before I read it to you, let me just say this. He stayed in math and science. He got all kinds of jobs. He worked for a long time as a Pullman car porter on the railroad train. But he still managed to go to school sometime, occasionally. He worked with Ben on his trucks, but he still managed to go to school sometime. He got a job with the Census Bureau as a census taker, but he still managed to go to school sometime. He got a job with the post office, I believe, in Chicago, but he still went off to school. So in the end, he worked, he came home. Oh, Mama convinced him to go back to school. He came home because Mama was left alone. All of us had gone. And she was there in the house by herself, and we all felt guilty about it. And so I told Jack, since he wasn't married to anybody, because I was married then, that he ought to come home and see about Mom. And so he came home, and Mom persuaded him to go back to school, which he did. He went back to college, Colorado College, and he finished, of course, and he got high honors, naturally, and his courses were math and science and engineering. And he got a job right after college, with no trouble, at the National Bureau of Standards, which was located at Boulder, Colorado now. And he worked with the National Bureau of Standards for several years. While he was there, he did this. He had several publications while he was there. But this is the one. This is the formula here, and I want you to see this, because this is a formula that was basic, very basic, to, now take that one off. That's right, keep it though. Can you get that formula there? Now, I'm not a physicist. I have no idea what this formula is, but it's the basic formula to expanding radio horizon, the radio horizon formula. In other words, what we're saying here is at one time, when radio was first out, and I guess we can let that go now. When radio was first used, or when we first discovered radio, we only had crystal sets, you see. We only had crystal sets. My brothers upstairs in the attic built us one, and it was just a board, and it had tubes in it, and wires and stuff, and an antenna, and then it had a rock, a crystal. And then there was a needle like a phonograph needle that you scratched across this rock. And you had earphones, and we could hear Amos and Andy. So that's how our first radio set we had. And the guys built it. Dolphus, Ted, I don't know. They built it. Make any sense to you? Well, you can study it later. Anyway, let me explain it to you so you'll know what I'm saying. Then you can study it. Just want to get this out. What it did was, you could only get just to the horizon, you see. You could only bring in radio signals from the horizon. And so that had a lot to do with expanding that reception across the horizon, see? Okay? And that's what he worked with other people. But that's nothing. Let me go on. All right, so he did that. And as a result of his work at the National Bureau of Standards, Welvin, he was recruited by North American Aviation, Welvin. Listen, he was recruited by North American Aviation out here to California to work on the Apollo. Now, I get excited about Jack. I really do, because he did some things. Let's see, let's put it over here somewhere, because I want to show you this. He worked on the Apollo. Now, the Apollo was the program that was going to send a man to the moon, as you probably know, right? Now, let's see, I want to get this to you for you. He worked on sending the man to the moon, and he wrote me a letter and told me that we were going to the moon in 1959, I believe it was. We didn't go until 1961, is that right? 62, something like that. Okay. Now, this is what he did that helped us to get to the moon and back. And these things he did not tell because everything he did for North American Aviation was highly, highly, highly classified. They examined him very carefully, the FBI did, the CIA. And he did not talk about what he did, but he's gone now and I can tell it. And I'm going to. And I guess everybody knows it, but they just don't really know who did it. Now, if you'll see, this was prepared by J.C. Stroud. I gotta see that. Put that down here. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm fumbling like this, but I'm trembling on this. Because these are the kinds of things that you never knew about. You see, prepared, this is the one I wanted to put out there. Prepared by J.C. Stroud is what I want to see. Prepared by J.C. Stroud. You see it? Okay. Now this is what he prepared. Now we may have to stand up to get this on. We may have to stand up. Okay? I don't know if you can get it. Okay.
Okay, right there where your hand is, Weldon, you're in the shadow.
Yeah, put your
Okay, it's in the shadow. Let me see
Okay.
that. See that formula, and then.
All right. Now, he was the mathematical theoretician for a group of scientists. He was the 13th. There were 12 of them who prepared, who built the guidance and control systems for the Apollo flights, for the spaceship. And it was Jack's job, his particular job, with the scientists' input, to figure the angle on the return. Here's the moon, here's the Earth. Okay? Now what this does, it tells the astronauts where to burn their propellant to guide that ship down to Earth. Jack says to me in his letter that let me find it now for you. I've got it here. Okay. This is what he says. He says the spacecraft will then enter a trajectory to return to Earth. At the Earth's environment, the spacecraft then goes into parking orbit again. Prior to an altitude of 400,000 feet above the Earth, the service module will be separated from the command module, which now will contain the 3 astronauts. It will have to go through certain maneuvers so that it will be erected to the proper angle with respect to the atmosphere. such that when it hits the atmosphere, it will have the heat shield forward and be coming in at the flight path angle required to keep it from overshooting or undershooting the Earth. Here's the Earth. Around the Earth you've got this atmosphere, which is just like a stone wall if you're coming from space, because when you're coming from space you're going so fast. You hit this atmosphere and the friction generates a tremendous amount of heat, and things just burn up like that. They come in from outer space. Now you've got these astronauts coming in like that from the moon. They hit this atmosphere, they're going to burn up. So you have to make some kind of a material that will take this heat, and so Jack said there were some scientists somewhere that prepared this heat shield that is tiles they talk about now. It's a tile-like substance that is so will absorb all the heat and will protect the module, the ship, and the astronauts within it, of course. But you've got to have that heat shield on the spaceship, and you've got to direct that spaceship so the heat shield will come in first. Then you've got to be sure that the angle is such that they don't go over here and the Earth is here. They don't go there, they don't go there. They go right where they're supposed to go. Now that was Jack's particular job. Okay. He says, this proper angle bit has been some of my personal responsibility. Now that's Jack's way of doing it. He said I had a little something to do with it. He was awfully, very, very modest about what he could do. But that thing thrills me. Every time one of those things come in there, I know they're coming in on my brother's angle. And I just get all filled up. So I think it's something that you need to know about yourself, that you probably don't know. I don't think anybody much knows it. And I don't think anybody has that chart with me. But he sent it to me because I was pretty good in math myself, and he thought I might understand what he was doing. I think he sent it, he didn't tell all of them what he told me, but I think all of them knew he had something to do with it. He says, our group has had the responsibility for determining the attitude reference system for this Apollo spacecraft. So when you guys hear about the ARS over the networks, you will know that lazy old Jack had a little something to do with it. It's a nice letter. He's got a lot more things in it. But that's he. Now where is the picture, Jack? Where did we put it? What did I put? Oh, well, I have some more.
Here it is.
And here are some more that you need to see. We'll just put them in front of the
Chart?
chart, yeah, if you can get it. Can you get it out? Yeah, there you go. Got the chart back on? Maybe we can do it. And if we can't, we'll move the chart. There he is. There he is doing the minute math. That's when he was at the minute math. This kind of guidance control system that they used for these figure things that he worked out, they used for the Minuteman also, and the Hound Dog missile, and the next missile that came after the Minuteman. So they kept their thumbs on Jack's work because it didn't want other countries to get it. Okay. Now here is a resume of his experience. Can you get those? Because I do have bigger ones if you can. I just thought maybe that would be better. Okay? All right. Here, let me read to you then. If it isn't working out fine, I can get bigger ones for you, but if you think it's okay, I will let it go.
Well, the bigger ones will work, but I did get those in.
You did get those in?
They're small, but the bigger ones will look good as well.
Would it? Well, let's see. Let me get those bigger ones too for you so you can put that on if you wish. I mean, this one.
Yes.
See, that's the same picture.
Very good. That will be sufficient.
Okay. Now. Okay. Now let me go ahead and tell you about him while he's focusing on that. I'll give you his resume from the last job he worked on before he retired. This is Computer Sciences Corporation staff resume, Jack C. Stroud. Education, BA and Graduate Studies in Mathematics, Colorado College. Awarded several academic scholarships. Completed government and industrial courses in statistical analysis, celestial, and engineering mechanics and computer programming. Professional experience, 7 years, National Bureau of Standards, research mathematician. 10.5 years, North American Rockwell Corporation, senior research engineer. He joined he joined Computer Sciences Corporation in March 1970. He retired from North American after they had finished their Apollo programs, and North American turned into, I think they call it, what do they call North American Rockwell now? I don't remember the name, but it's Northrop. Northrop is what North American Rockwell used to be. I'm just so proud of what Jack did, and it is so important. All of these burns, he figured out where they're supposed to burn their engines, and his work was given to these astronauts. Where did that go? Oh my. Now where? Oh, here it is on the floor. No wonder. That was given to these. I've got Armstrong in red, and I've got Shepard in red. You may remember those two names, but those are those names I picked out. We know Armstrong was on the space shot. Shepard, and that was sent to them to help them to know what to do to bring the ships back. Okay, but there are other names too that are listed in other technical notes that he has. Okay. Now, summary. Background in the development of systems for navigation and guidance applications. With the National Bureau of Standards, Mr. Stroud was assigned to the Central Radio Program Propagation Laboratories, where he participated in a variety of research programs. In the course of this work, he performed studies of tropospheric scatter and receiver and transmitter antenna field strengths. He was also responsible for the determination of power gains and losses for variable physical criteria. With North American, he was assigned to the Combat Evaluation Launch portion of the missile project, GAM 77/77A missile project, where he participated in guidance and control, error analysis, and mission performance evaluation studies. On assignment to the Apollo contract, he worked on the command module system, with emphasis on trajectory criteria elements. During this time, he determined attitude reference system parameters for required flight trajectories and atmospheric entry angle tolerances. That's a lot of big words to say what I just finished telling you. Okay. He also formulated specifications for system software, simulation, and documentation. Later, he was responsible for the design and implementation of systems for the analysis of Minuteman missile flight data. In the course of this work, he developed a program to simulate flight parameters to show the C of G variation, angular dispersions, and position patterns. He is familiar with the IBM 360 and 7094 computers, and with Fortran and PL/I languages. This was 1970. And of course, we've gone a long, long way with computers since then. That was in the infancy of computers. Now, he wrote a lot of things. There's been a lot of technical notes and a lot of publications, but none of those things have been available to the public. And so I can't really tell you all of the different things that he's written, but he published a lot of things. Every time they send out some kind of spacecraft to go beyond the atmosphere, they come back in on this angle, so they'll be right. And I think you can remember, you know, that nothing has ever burned up coming into this atmosphere. Nothing has ever burned up. Things have burned up on the way out, but never coming back in. And if you will remember, even the first Apollo that went out there came back in within 3 miles of the ship that was ready to pick it up. They came in on Jack's angle. And I keep thinking about that, and you know, it just fills me clear up. So he was something. Now, he was not the smart man that your father was. He wasn't as smart as Dolphus. But he had so much
Perseverance.
and not only that, we all had a lot of ability, all of us did. So I must read you this. I think I did. I read you this. Itsy Bitsy Bonnie J. This is Jack's book. So the guy, God, I wanted to wait until he came back so he could hear it. But he has to do something. This is his book that he wrote, and this is poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Jack was quite a poet. I guess all people are. Take some of these things off here now. All people are poets, I think, who are mathematically inclined, maybe not, I don't know. We take all of that off. And we'll just leave, I guess, that up there. Leave that up for a while. And then I'll take it down. So, let me read to you just one poem. Oh, he was a poet. He was a poet when he was a little boy. When he was going to North Junior High School, he is the one who made up their school song that we still hear sung there. And that's "We Are the Vikings, North Junior Vikings." But this is the one I really do like. And this is the one that he writes in memory of his mother. Itsy Bitsy Bonnie J. Did you hear that? You heard it. So I'm going to put it on the tape, though. Never spoke much to us. Most words ushered from her eyes, and her days were heavy laden, full of anxious hopes and sighs. No one knew too much about her, often hummed a spiritual song. Gently it would float out to us, measuring the right from wrong. Each one's task, when well accomplished, all then listened to her say, "Itsy bitsy, itsy bitsy, Bonnie J." Well, with the washboard tub work finished, one might wait a breath or two. But it was a fleeting moment, always something else to do. If her stern look slipped a smile, then one longed to hear her say, "Itsy bitsy, itsy bitsy, Bonnie J." With the kindling wood chop ended, each piece stacked and neatly piled, you would hunger for approval if you were the chopping child. You could tell by pat or love touch, while her words would boost your day, "Itsy bitsy, itsy bitsy, Bonnie J." School's homework would be before us. When night study time had come, she surveyed, encouraged progress, always there her guiding hum. When time came to show grade markings, then if to her one showed an A, "Itsy bitsy, Bonnie J." And those children still surviving think of her historic youth, learned that pride and honor birthed her, blessed by the eternal truth. But wherever she's now resting, with these words to her they'll pray, "Rest, abide in peace forever. Itsy bitsy, Bonnie J." That I love. He had one that he used to do, and I'm going to stop him because I've got to do too many others. I hate to let him go.
Yeah.
I got to do too many others. And so let me just say this is the one he wrote. I was put in his obituary. Triumph. When I taste my final breath, cradled in the arms of death, there's a pre-world mystic realm I seem to know. A colorama brightening blare beams out high above death's stare, vapor-like above a languid quiet sea. Instantly all is there. All that is reality, but that majesty, that there-ness, there is me. I'll be there, yes, I'll be there. Death lifts me up each eternal stair to that wide eternity. Great God, that wide expense, call me. In that great getting up morning, I'll be there. Jack told me that the more he learned, the more science he learned, the more he knew there was God. That's what he said. And I guess he knows. That's Jack. He died of heart attack. He had died of a bad heart, actually. He had an operation of what do you call triple bypass or bypass. He wrote a poem about people having zippers up their chests, talking about bypass surgery. But after a while, his heart gave out, and he left us. And that was when?
84.
84. Now, the next one is Lulu. Lulu is one that has so much about her that's been written, and so much publicity that I'm going to kind of go through her fast, because I think you've heard a lot about Lulu, all of you. I don't know. Just do it like this. Because I didn't want to leave this pipe speak here. Well, we get through, I didn't want to leave that. Here's Lulu. She's the one that has published these calendars for all of you, and she's the one that wrote our history in brief, and she is one that put all these, many of these pictures I've shown you that have been on her calendar. She, Lula, Nina is I, Rosa, and Bobby, we were the Four People's Club. Someone asked me what the Four People's Club was. Well, when we were little kids, we were all together, 4 little girls, at the end of the line. Got ourselves together when we were, growing up, and we had our own little private club, you see. So we didn't worry about who wouldn't invite you to his or her party or whose club you couldn't get into. We had our club, and we called it the Four People's Club. And Lulu was the director of the shows we used to put on. We used to put on shows. We would dance and sing and play the piano and all that kind of junk and invite the neighborhood children to come and hear our shows, and they came. And we charged them $1, a penny or 2 pennies or something to get in it. And Lulu was the director. Lulu can't sing a note. She would laugh at this, and I thought she could sing. Well, she was really tone deaf completely. And Rosa and I and Bobby could all sing, and all of us could dance. And I could play the piano, and Rose could play a little bit, and Bobby could play it, And so we would play the piano, sing and dance, put on the follies, and tap dance and stuff, and Lulu would be directing it. That was the Four People's Club. Anyhow, when we were little, and that gets into my story, I won a contest, a talent contest, and Lula directed me about it. And it was at the Burns Theater downtown, but I'll talk about that later. And I think I was 9 years old. Now, Lula, her education was Colorado Springs Public Schools, but she was the one that got angry and said, I am not going to Colorado College High School, College. By the way, she was skipped 3 times. And she was way ahead of herself. And that's when Mama put her foot down and said, you're going to skip another child of mine. Because they wanted to skip me 3 times too, but she wouldn't let them. They said just twice. They skipped me once, She said, that's enough, no more. Skipped her 3 times, and she was also sick while she was in high school, so therefore, her record wasn't as great in high school as the rest of us. But she said she would not go to Colorado College. She'd had it, And so she insisted on going south to school, and she did. She went to Prairie View State College, Texas, where she became a member of the Honor Society there, and she graduated with honors from Langston University in Oklahoma. And she received additional formal education in accounting and financial management with the New York Business Academy, the International Accounting Schools, and the Army's Finance and Accounting Center at Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indiana. And she completed other programs in management and counseling and in personnel management, especially though in accounting. She was treasurer. She worked in the treasurer's office at both Langston and at Prairie View. And she put herself completely through school because then Father wasn't blind, and then there just was no help, excepting coming from what her brothers and sisters would be able to do. But so she really put herself through school, through those 2 schools. Now, she was born in 1917, March 18th, in Colorado Springs, and so forth and so on. She married Rufus Johnson, a former teacher at Langston University, in 1939. That marriage ended with divorce in 1943, and then she became the wife of Leonard Pollard in 1951, and she will celebrate 34 years of marriage in she married Leonard in 1951, yeah. And on October 19th, 1985, they will celebrate 34 years of marriage, but it's, you know, this is 93 now.
Another 10 years.
Yeah, this is 93 now, so 40 is almost 50 years of that. Okay, Lula has held a variety of jobs, from domestic day worker, cook, and laundry worker to regional and national bureaucrat, and that's true. She was employed in the treasurer's office at Howard University, Washington, D.C., Prairie View State College, and assistant treasurer at Langston University. And during World War II in Washington, D.C., she was employed as head of international purchasing and accounting for the Russians. Now, she said one of the foreign allied governments. But I was in Washington, D.C. at the time there, too. And I got a job working as a draftswoman for the Department of Commerce. But she worked for the Russians because she couldn't get a job with the United States Civil Service Commission as an accountant because of her skin color. Mm. And she got a job with the Russians.
The Russians didn't care.
No, they did not care. They did not care. And so she got this big job with them. And I know how tight the Russian security was or whatever, because there was a Russian girl she brought to our apartment one night. And the Russian girl was nervous as she could be because she wasn't supposed to be away from the Russian embassy or any place else here where she could be contaminated against communism. It was in Washington, D.C. where I learned to despise communism. It was right there because they were trying to recruit Lulu and I into the Communist Party. And I know how awful it could be. And it's something you don't want to be as a communist. You don't want to be that. Okay. Anyway, she was hired. She went back to Colorado, and we had the Colorado Fair Employment Practices Law was passed about then. So she got a job as civilian payroll clerk at Fort Carson, and then from then on she just went up and up and up and up, and she really did get to be pretty high up in the bureaucracy. At the end of it, she went to, she was transferred to Oakland Army Air Base and came out here, and she worked there for a long time. And then when she went to Washington, D.C., in 1973, she accepted promotion to the job of National Equal Opportunity Officer for the Military Traffic Management Command in Washington, D.C. And she was a member of the General's top staff and also a member of the Department of Army's National Equal Opportunity Officers at the Pentagon. Mm-hmm. And in 1976, that's where her job, she went to Washington. Mm-hmm. It's quite a big job. And in 1976, she retired from the federal service, and in 1977, she opened Pollard's Retirement and Counseling and Accounting Service at Clear Lake, California. She specialized in solving problems for retirees and providing financial management and accounting services to businesses. She returned to Colorado Springs to live in 1979, and she has continued to be self-employed as Pollard Services, with most of her work coming from out of state. Because of her heavy workload, she does not advertise for additional business, and of course now, it's now 93, and she started in 79, so it's about time for her to stop working entirely, but she still continues with her in Hawks magazine. This is one of the books she wrote. Well, this is the book she wrote on retirement, and she wrote that when she was in California when she did that. Okay? That's Lulu. She was, in all kinds of organizations she's been in. I'm not going to try to read that whole thing to you. She's had all kinds of awards and recognitions. Well, let's see. She got citations from foreign diplomats and members of the United States Congress, national, state, and local government agencies and organizations. Her picture and articles about her have been published in newspapers in many areas of the country since the late 1930s, and she has appeared on several TV stations. She especially has appeared a lot on the local Colorado Springs TV station because of her work with the history. I should say that. She's done a lot of work with the history of black people in the Pikes Peak region. And that came along with her work with, what do we call it, the Negro Historical Association of Colorado Springs. And she publishes a bulletin monthly about Colorado Negroes, or black people, and their history. And she has a lot of information about that. And they have now, in Colorado Springs, part of the library and of the museum that's dedicated to those of us who were pioneers in that region. I think that's kind of unique in this United States. In 1980, although she has accomplished much during her years, no, you don't want to hear that. She has been a guest speaker for a large number of religious, civic, and historical organizations, lodges, fraternities, sororities, social groups, grade and high school students, as well as college and university students and faculty groups. This is because of this work that she has done with the history of black people, as I was going to say, in Colorado Springs.
What was it that you were going to read that you said we didn't
Well,
want to hear?
this is just, she wrote this resume for these sororities. She says, although she has accomplished much during her years, the Iota Beta Omega chapter of AKA feels that the volunteer work that Lula, with her husband Leonard, has done to build NHOCS, that's the National Historical Association of Colorado Springs, with little or no help into a viable organization with members located throughout the United States and in its islands, is worthy of recognition by the CPWPA, which I don't know. Colorado, I don't know what that is. Let's see. Let's see, this resume was written for whom? Let me see, maybe I can tell it that way. I asked her to give me her resume, and so she sent me this. Oh, this is, Colorado Black Women for Political Action. That's what that is, Colorado Black Women for Political Action. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, because there's so much that's been published and written about Lulu that I think she might be already well known. Lots and lots of publications, lots and lots of honors. And you know, you can, as I say, you can write a book on some of us anyway. So this is it. Unless you have more that you want me to say about her, I've got 3 more to go. I think she'll forgive me. Anyway, I hope she does. There's lots about her. There's almost as much about Rosa, maybe more. There's the same amount about me, or maybe more. But, you know, you have to just do so much, and you can't do it all. Hi, Lula. There you go. And besides, I wanted to really stress Jack, because nobody knows about him. Nobody knows what he did. Now, this is going to be Nina. I have to show you this, because I think this needs to go there also. Now, this is my birth certificate, okay? So everybody can see what my folks named me. They named me number 9 Stroud. If there's any doubt about it, there it is, okay?
Can you get that?
Number 9 Stroud. That's what I was named.
Right there.
I got a job because of that birth certificate once. Guys didn't believe me. When I went to Chicago the first time to get a job, I told the people there, they required me to tell them my correct name, and I did, and they didn't believe it. And so I got my birth certificate, and I got a job, because see, they made a bet. The superintendent of schools and the assistant superintendent of schools made a bet that it wasn't true. And I said, it is true. And so they made a bet, and I produced the birth certificate, and one of them won the bet, and I told him, I said, well, since you won some money off of me, you ought to give me a job. They gave me a job. So that's how I got my first job teaching school in Chicago. I was a substitute. Now, it was corrected because the teachers at Bristol Elementary School decided I could not go, they decided it was the wrong name, that I shouldn't have the name number 9. But what they did, Welvin, is they changed my name to N-I-N-A, Nina they called it, without asking my mother and my father a thing about it. And that has made me angry all my life. Because when I got big enough to realize how awful that was, that's arrogant. You've been a teacher. I wouldn't dream of changing one of my kids' names. I don't care how bad I thought it was, without first saying to the parents, look, I think this is inappropriate for the child.
But you think totally different.
You see? What I'm trying to say is they were so arrogant.
Well, it's white people.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
It's not arrogant.
I'm
it's
trying
just white.
to tell you what those white people thought of us. I'm
Yeah.
trying to say that my mother and my father didn't matter at all. They
That's
thought,
right.
well, we're just a bunch of niggers who don't know anything.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think one of the reasons why this might have been done this way, I know what Mama said. She said she was tired of having so many babies, and she was tired. And she thought Lula was her last child. And so they gave Lula 6 or 7 names. Lula's name was Eleanor, Ann, Lillian, Elsa, Sarah, Lula. She got to me and there were no names left for me, and nobody came to name me, you see. And so someone else told me that Dolphus decided, well, you ought to number her or something. We see how it comes out. I won't blame Dolphus for this, but anyway, when I found out how awful it was, I decided at that point that they were going to say it the way I wanted it said. And I have been Nina ever since. And I cannot stand Nina. And the reason I can't stand it is because that's what the dumb white teachers thought they would do instead of number 9. N-I-N-A is supposed to be pronounced Nina. You know, I've been to Europe, and it's all over Europe, but it's Nina. Russia is a big one on Nina. They have Ninas all the time, but nobody calls it Nina. They call it Nina.
Except Colorado Springs white people.
Except Colorado Springs white people who had no sense. Plus the Southerners do that too. They call it Nina. I have to correct them. But I lived in Chicago with a colored woman from the South, and she called me Nina too, although everybody in Chicago called me Nina because that's the name I used all the time after I left home. But she did. She called it Nina. And so you get Southerners say, Nina. That kills me.
Like Dinah.
But, you know, they have to have it Nina. Anyhow, I just wanted you to see this. I had to, since they put all my records in N-I-N-A, there was no way for me to keep my name. And so I had it legally changed. But even today, I have to carry 2 birth certificates around. I had to have 2 to go overseas to get a passport. Because this says corrected. See, that says correction certificate. So they say, where's the original? That's for everything I do. I have to have 2 birth certificates. That requires a birth certificate. Because this isn't my real birth certificate. Of course, some people say the reason that, well, maybe that might be part of it too, that Mama having her Indian background has called me number 9 because of the Indian way would be very acceptable. So maybe that was the reason. Anyway, I had to show you that. I thought that needed to go on the tape because you need to have a permanent record of this. I didn't see anything wrong with number 9. See, I didn't. Being a little child, that's what my people called me. And the short name was 90. Everybody called me 90. Sometimes they say number, but it was always 90. And so when I went to school and they changed my name to 9, I could not see why. And I still don't see why. They should have had Mama's and Father's permission. They should have said, we don't think this is appropriate, and we think you ought to give your child a more acceptable name. That's what they should have said. And so that made me angry. There I am at 2 years old. This is me, as I say, when I was 2 years old. And I told you that about my name, which was a problem to me most of my life, and it still is in some respect because of the fact that of the attitude of those people. Now, I went to the same schools and we did all these things. As a child, there were 2 or 3 things that happened that I think were really a little bit outstanding to me. They were, and that was the first time I was on the stage. And I wanted to be on the stage all my life, and I wanted to be a performer. I wanted to be a concert musician or an opera singer. Now, this is what I wanted, and I was very musical. I don't remember the time when I couldn't play the piano. I don't remember when I couldn't sing. When I was a little girl in a crib, I would sing in the morning when I woke up, and my big brothers were ready to go to the golf links to caddy, as they all did. And I remember how Dolphus used to come down and even give me $50 because he liked my song so well. Anyhow, when I was 9 years old, I was in a talent show and I won it. And I sang Am I Blue, trying to be Ethel Waters. I'll never forget it. She was an old-time entertainer. You may have heard her name. I did real well in school. I had the highest IQ of any child in Colorado Springs. The teachers that I had there, I met one of them. She said it was somewhere way up there in the stratosphere. And then she said something like 140 or something. But I think most of us had it. Most of us had IQs of about 130, 140, maybe 150. Anyway, I went through school and I got a 4-year honor scholarship to the University of Colorado. Well, everybody else had gotten scholarships to CC, but I did not want to stay in Colorado Springs. Better go back for just a minute. The reason that I was so angry at Colorado Springs was because when I went there, they were just as nasty to me as they were to the other ones. And they hadn't changed at all, not much. And when I got music, 4 years as with a piano teacher, but then Father went blind and my piano lessons had to stop. And remember, music was all I wanted. And so I went to junior high. I got music at school because in school, in elementary school, we had special music teachers that would come and teach music to the whole classroom. And they taught us elementary harmony, about musical notation. When I got to junior high, everybody in junior high, in the 7th grade, also had classroom music. We had a special teacher, we had vocal music. But in the 8th grade, then you had to take music as an elective. And you had to join a musical organization, like the school chorus, or like the band, or the orchestra. They would not allow me to be in it, into any of them. Now, my teacher told me I was the best student that she had ever had. And she had me actually take over the class when she had to leave the room for whatever reason. I sang tenor with the boys and taught them their tenor. I sang bass with the boys. I sang soprano with the sopranos, and I sang alto with the altos. Because in the 7th grade, you learn how to do part singing. At least we did that. She wouldn't let me in her glee club in the 8th grade. And I asked her after school, why is it, Miss Dockstader, that you didn't let me in the glee club? She says, I couldn't. I couldn't because we don't let colored girls in the glee club. Oh, Jesus. And I said, well, why not? And she said, Nina, you're the best student I've ever had, but I can't let you in because you're colored. And I said, why not? She says, the white parents will object. And I said, how about my parents? What about my parents? And she told me my parents didn't matter. Now, I was in the 7th grade, and that got me. And I'll tell you, I came home ready to quit school then and there, right that minute. My father was blind. The boys were mostly gone, and Lulu was ready to go anyway. That, I think, made her go. And I told Father, Mom and Father was so mad I couldn't see, and I said, I'm not going back to that school anymore. And Father took me on his knee, and he said, now listen, Nina. He said, just calm down, calm down. I want you to remember that my father and my mother were slaves. That I brought my family to the north because I thought my kids would get a better education, and you are. He says, what are you taking in school? And I told him. He said, what are you going to take next year in the 8th grade? Because, see, this is when all this was going to happen. And I said, I'm going to have algebra. He said, yeah, algebra? He said, you're going to take algebra? I said, yes. And what else are you going to have? Well, I'm going to start Latin in the 9th grade, I think. Latin? Wow. What else? Science. Science! Wow. What else? I said, well, we're going to have English. English, some more English. And we're going to have European history. He said, listen to me, Nina. He said, listen hard. Only he called me 90, you understand. Listen hard, 90. I want you to cry if you want to, but I want you to go back to that school. Go back to that school. Remember, your grandmother and your grandfather were both slaves and didn't have a chance to get any education. Remember, I never in my life had a chance to get algebra. I never in my life got science, you know. He says, I want you to go back to that school. I want you to sit on the front row if you can. I want you to write down everything your teacher puts on the blackboard if you can. If you can't, remember. He said, learn as much as you can from them. All right, they won't let you take music. But what they will let you take, you learn every bit you can and go as far as you can. And then maybe you will know how to fight it. I've never forgotten it. I still don't forget. You got to have an education first. Then you've got the tools to do something. And you use your education that way. I went to school and I did my very best. They wouldn't even let me in physical education. After music, I liked physical education because I was always a tomboy. Always tried to do what Dolphus was doing, or Tandy was doing, something like that, you know. So I went on to the University of Colorado, and there I am when I got my Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Colorado. This is in the Crisis magazine also. They put me in there, and I was one of the few that they had that graduated from a white university from the north. I was the only graduate that the University of Colorado had that year who was black. And when I went to the University of Colorado, there were only 6 of us who were black kids in that whole big school, and I think they had 10,000 students. The University of Colorado at Boulder was much more liberal than Colorado Springs had been. And besides, I was away from home. But the scholarship was only for tuition. And I had to work for my room and board. It wasn't easy at all because I was not at home. That's the reason I know what I know about Tandy. It isn't easy. None of the scholarships were for room and board in those days, and there had never been another student in Colorado Springs that was a scholarship recipient to the University of Colorado. Okay, and after I went there for 3 years, I wasn't able to keep my scholarship, but also I had a guilt feeling about my mother being home because Father had died then. Father died when I was a sophomore. And when I was a junior, I went back to school, but there was Mama and just Rosa and Bobby. And I really didn't see how they were going to make it. In fact, Mama asked me if I wouldn't stay home and help her. But I went ahead. So I didn't do too well my junior year, and I lost my scholarship because my grades weren't quite up to what they were supposed to be. I was supposed to keep a B+ average. Okay, and so it dropped down to about a B-. And so I lost my scholarship. So I went home for a year, and I worked on the WPA as a nursery school teacher, helping Mama and getting up the money to go back to finish. And I went back and I finished the next year, and I graduated with 2 degrees, Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Education degrees. With all of that, don't you know, they couldn't find a job. The Placement Bureau at the University of Colorado could not find a job for me teaching school anywhere in the state of Colorado. I graduated in 1941. Now, I want to say this. They didn't allow me to take music in the 7th grade, in the 8th grade. My mother had no money to send me to give me private lessons. And they didn't allow me to take music in the 9th grade nor in high school. They didn't allow me to be in a musical organization in high school. I couldn't be in the Alpha Kappa Choir anywhere. So what happened was, I had no music on my record. You follow me? I had no music. Having no music on my record, I could not apply anywhere for a musical scholarship. Now this is the hurt that it did. I do think I had talent enough to be a concert artist. I really do. I've been in music long enough to know, but I never had the opportunity to learn. And this hurt, and it hurt all my life, and it still hurts me to this very day. And it never will stop. And it's one of those things that I say that was so vicious about the kind of prejudice we have, which you don't have at all today. And that's the reason I take the attitudes that I take. Now, this is in really roughly tells you the way I felt. So I went ahead and did what they let me do. Oh, by the way, they wouldn't even let me in the physical education things either. It couldn't be in the Women's Athletic Association or anything like that. And then when I got to the University of Colorado, where I may have had a chance, you see, I didn't have anything on my record. I couldn't apply to Oberlin or any of those. You understand what I'm saying. Well, so we can get through. I got these 2 degrees, and since they wouldn't let me work anywhere in Colorado, the president of the university went south and east to to try to find me a job with my own people. And he came back with an opportunity for me to go to Hampton Institute as a teaching assistant. He gave me a teaching fellowship. I mean, they were going to give me a teaching fellowship to Hampton Institute in Virginia. And he says, if you'll take this, Nina, and get with your own people, I'm sure you will find work. And he was right. After going to Hampton Institute for a year, after being there for a year, I've never had any trouble since then finding a job anywhere. Okay. Not anywhere. I went to Hampton Institute, and I went, by the way, to Ben's first and worked with him one summer. We all did. And then I had money to go on to Hampton. But my fellowship covered my room and board and a stipend. I got $10 a month. So that was enough for me to make it on. Besides, Lulu would send me clothes, and so would Effie. So there wasn't too much difficulty there. And I had the best food I've ever had in my life. Because Hampton Institute had a farm. You know, they taught agriculture there. And you have that farm food, which is wonderful food. They were working on Booker T. Washington's philosophy, because Booker T. Washington, you know, was educated at Hampton Institute. And Hampton Institute is the oldest Negro university in the United States. And there on the campus is the rock that marks the place where the first slave ship came to this country. It came into Chesapeake Bay and anchored at Hampton Roads. And one of the fleet, the United States fleets is there. Well, it's on the ocean. Okay, it's on the bay, where the bay meets the ocean. That's where Hampton Institute is. Lovely, lovely campus. I'd never seen the foliage, the lush foliage in my life. I'd never seen a magnolia tree, you know. I'd never heard a mockingbird sing, all that kind of thing. Well, anyway, I was there for years, one of the best years of my life, and I was the assistant, the teaching assistant for the Dr. Kenneth Clark, the one whose experiments in psychology, the dolls thing, you know, convinced the Supreme Court that they ought to desegregate schools. The experiments that Thurgood Marshall used when he fought that Brown versus the Board of Education through the Supreme Court. And Dr. Clark was my teacher. Okay? That's one of the reasons I have the attitudes I have. He taught racial psychology, among other things. He taught social psychology. He talked to me and the few other teaching fellows that were assigned to him about this business, why prejudice occurs, how it occurs, the kinds of things that happen that stimulate it, etc. All right, to get through though. After leaving Hampton Institute, and I did, because $10 a month is not a lot of money, and I had an opportunity to work. I went to Perry, Oklahoma, first of all, and worked as a summer school teacher, and then I went home to Colorado, and I couldn't stand, you know, the South actually. There in Perry, Oklahoma, I was not protected in a Negro campus. I was just out in that town. So I couldn't stand that segregation down there. And so I went back home and found a job with the Army, you know, as a civilian employee, and I was a social hostess. That is to say, in World War II, we had, on each post where men were stationed, we had a service club to take care of the enlisted men's social needs. You know, writing letters for them, keeping a library for them, running a guest house for their relatives and their wives and their families and things to come to see them, and that kind of thing is what we did. So I worked at Fort Carson, Colorado, and then I went to Fort Alice. I went to Great Lakes Naval Station and worked there as a library hostess. Ran the library. Those sailors had to study, and their place there. I would be in the Navy if I was going to be in the military, because it's a different type of situation entirely. And then I worked at Camp Ellis, Illinois. And working at Camp Ellis, Illinois, some soldier had been a musician in Chicago, and he told me, "You play the piano well enough to be a musician. You should go into Chicago and join the union and start playing the piano, make yourself a living after the war is over." And I remember that. So after the war was over, I went to Chicago, and of course there was Ben in Chicago. And I, first of all, applied to teach school there. that's when I got the job as a substitute, as I told you, because of my name. And I was substituted for a little while, but pretty soon I did go ahead and join the union. And I did start getting jobs playing as a professional pianist and singer. No, I just continued, you see what I'm saying, to teach myself all along. And when I was a professional singer and pianist, I got a lot of help from those Negro musicians. And some of them, one of those, well, there's several of them that gave me a lot of help. But they told me the things I ought to study, the exercises I ought to do, things to develop technique and strengthen fingers, and that kind of thing. And I got to listen to really good piano players. And most all of those old ones had some sort of instruction. For an example, one of the guys was Roselle Gale. He was out of the Chicago Musical College, and Ernie Harvey was a great one, and he was out of the Pittsburgh Conservatory. And Art Tatum was the greatest. He was better than Horowitz or Rachmaninoff or any of them. He came out of the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. But we had to play jazz because they would not allow us to belong to the white union. We had a black union, you understand. And the white union men and women got all of the good jobs. I mean, all of the jobs where you did, let's say, classical music or standard music, like that. They played for the shows that came into Chicago. So you had to play jazz.
Who was that? Who was the best, you say?
Art Tatum.
Art Tatum.
Yeah, Lord, he's dead now.
Yeah.
He was terrific. But he would weave all of these
What
classical...
about Gene Harris? Did you know
I
Gene
don't know
Harris?
who Gene Harris is. See, I know these old-timers.
Yeah.
Because I was there in the 40s. For example, I do know who Nat King Cole was. I shared the elevator with him. When he went up to see his agent, I was going to see mine at the same time. But he was already out of Chicago in California when I saw him. And he was telling us at one jam session we were on that we all ought to move out of Chicago. We could get someplace. You know, we were just playing joints in Chicago,
Yeah.
you know, different kinds of joints. Sometimes good jobs, sometimes poor jobs. My agent just kept me working. He says his attitude was just keep you working. Sometimes somebody will see you, and that's where you get a break. I found out in this kind of thing, in entertainment, in any art, I guess, you have to get a break. There's all kinds of good ones around you. Everybody around you is real good. It's just who gets a break, as Lena Horne said. She just got chosen. I've been on jam sessions with people, well, actually, Ella Fitzgerald. I've been on a jam session with Ella Fitzgerald. This girl, oh God, I can't think of her name. Well, I can't tell her name. But she's an older one that's still active in the business. She was around. Billie Holiday, listen, I was there in Chicago when Billie Holiday came to Chicago, and I sat right up on the bar and listened to her sing, all that kind of thing. Oh, Dizzy Gillespie I couldn't stand from the beginning.
Why?
Well, I just didn't like his music. We played old-fashioned jazz that was built on classical harmony. So when the jazz artists started changing the harmony, and they went out to this modern harmony, they start with people like, take off with people like Shostakovich and Stravinsky and those people who just left classical harmony alone, then that's when I just fell out of love with jazz. I don't like this modern stuff. I just like that that's built on the harmony that I think's pretty. Anyway, that's me as a jazz pianist. No, I did. I ran into a lot of those people that you hear about nowadays.
You're a foxy-looking woman, ain't you?
Yeah, I mean, well, this was my entertainment picture. I was an entertainer. Come on now. I was trying to my agent used this to try to get me jobs, and he did get me jobs.
Well, I guess he would.
I had other pictures. That's just the only one Percy left. Percy has destroyed all, showed his children, his people pictures, you know. This is me as a school teacher, okay? Now, to get to the playing the piano, which I did for about 5 years. You want to?
Oh, that's fine. Yes.
Okay. Put them both up so you can see. Wait, that's what these things are for, to hold it on. That's why I got
I'll
those
put
things
this
there.
back up because it needs to be protected.
Oh, that's not doing it, is it? Well, that certainly won't do it. We have to hold it.
Yeah, that was okay.
Okay, there. So, oh, wow, let me put this one in here. Anyway.
Move the little one over a little bit.
This one?
Fill up that
that space that
Okay. Bye bye. Anyway, I stayed about 5 or 6 years, and I came home to see Mama. Oh, I forgot. I better put this
yeah,
in.
that's fine.
When I was working for the Army, the military, at Fort Carson, I met my first husband, who was Sam Collins. And it wasn't much of a marriage. It was just one of these things, you know, all of us girls thought all these guys are going to go overseas and going to get killed, we better get married. So we all got married. They could possibly get married. It was real easy because they had Fort Carson out there with all these men. And just a handful of girls in Colorado Springs, you see. So everybody got married. So I got married too. But Sam Collins was a nice enough guy, I guess. Except it was just a war marriage, and that's all it was. I think I spent maybe 10 weeks with him. He was shipped overseas about 6 weeks after we were married. And he fought with Patton in the army that went up the middle of Europe and liberated all those prisoners, by the way. He was in the Army of Occupation, and they were in Auschwitz. Is that right? Auschwitz?
Yeah.
No, not the prison. The something Austria. Innsbruck, Austria, because we passed Innsbruck almost when I was overseas singing with the choir. Okay? So when he came home, you know, it just didn't happen. It just wasn't going. He was going his way and I was going mine. So we did. And so it didn't last very long. I got a divorce. So I continued to play the piano. And after went home once between engagements, I played all over Chicago. I played outside in Milwaukee. I played in Winnetka and all these various places. Omaha. And I played mostly, though, in Chicago and didn't want to leave. And that's the trouble. Nat King Cole told us we had to get out of Chicago if we were going to get anywhere. But we stayed there. And so anyway, I got to her. Got her. Anyway, I went home once to see Mama between engagements, and I ran into my husband. That is my son's father, Harry Pellerin. Okay, now he had been a soldier in the Korean War, and he was in Fort Carson again. But I met him in my mama's house because he was staying with my sister and her husband. He was visiting them. My sister's husband was his first cousin, and my sister is Bobby. So my son and those kids, her kids, are double cousins. Cousins on both sides of the family. You understand? I still continued to play the piano while we were married until it broke up, and the marriage did break up, although we tried to hold it together, but it didn't work out. Now, it was because of the difference in culture more than anything else, and the difference, of course, there was some difference in age, but it was mostly the difference in culture. Because he was one of these Louisiana Creoles. He was a black man. He wasn't dark in color. He was very fair. He could pass. And he decided he wanted to be white. Now that's why we broke up, actually. Because he found someone white and, you know, we didn't fit in anymore. Okay. So he went his way, and I took the son. He gave me custody of the child with no problem. Gave me the house with no problem. Of course, I had paid most of it, but because I was an entertainer and he was a cook. So you see what I'm saying. So it didn't matter. It wasn't paid for anyway. But he went on, went on and got himself somebody white. It was that simple. Now, I've always though thought he should have paid more attention to his son, but that's another thing that doesn't always happen. When that happened, when I knew my marriage was going to break up, and I did know it, I decided at that point I didn't think it would be. I thought it would be better for me to teach than to play the piano at night. I thought it would be better if I taught, because then Percy would be going to school and I'd be going to school the same time. I'd be at home at night when he was there, rather than being out all night every night playing the piano. So I decided at that point I was going to start breaking down prejudice in Colorado Springs. Now I had tried several times after leaving Colorado University to get a job teaching in Colorado, but I hadn't been successful. They always had no vacancy, and it was Colorado Springs. I decided I was going to get a job teaching in Colorado Springs, and so I started, and I was really determined. First of all, they were trying to break down prejudice all over the United States at that time, and they were trying in Colorado Springs too. So first of all, I you worked with the Unity Council, which was an organization to do that. But I saw they weren't going to do what had to be done. They thought it could be done by persuasion and by negotiation. Oh, no way. No way were they going to do that way. So I went to Denver and filed a complaint, and I did this myself. The Unity Council nor the NAACP nor nobody else helped me. I was just determined. I went and filed a complaint with the Civil Rights Commission, which we had. Colorado has a law, and had it in its constitution, that there was no discrimination because of race in Colorado. They had the law, nobody obeyed it. But so I used that law, and I went up there with my complaint. What I had done was I had found 5 teachers who had been hired that year, the same year my application went in. 5 teachers had been hired who didn't even have a college degree. Didn't even have a college degree and no experience. Now I had worked on my master's. I had a whole year's work on my master's degree. Plus, I had gone to the Conservatory of Music in Chicago while I was there, Chicago Conservatory. Plus, I had had some teaching experience at Hampton Institute because I was teaching assistant. You know, that meant I did some teaching. And I'd had this experience in Perry, and I'd had the experience in Chicago. Okay. So, when I put in that claim, immediately they sent an investigator to Colorado Springs. I put in my complaint on Thursday. On Friday, the investigator was in Colorado Springs talking to the superintendent of schools. Monday morning, they called me to work. And that was in 1954.
1954.
I was the first black teacher in Colorado Springs, the second in the state, public school teacher.
It must move pretty fast.
You know, the movement that you made then, on your own,
On my own.
is the kind of movement that thousands of people must have done
This is what
to
happened.
create the energy
That's
that
what-
brought about a Martin Luther King.
That's what I want you to understand. It's been going
it's
for
not,
a long time.
It's not the person himself,
Yes.
No,
but
it
it's
was
these little
all
moves,
stuff.
individual
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And we don't have that happening now as a group.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
It's
All over the country it was happening.
It's reminiscent of Rosa Parks.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
That
all
day
over
of
this
Black
country.
Color.
Yeah.
All over this country. Things were going on like that. In the 54s, you know, that was when we had Brown versus the Board of Education.
Right.
Remember? That was the year when thing was happening. That was in the years preceding that, the few years preceding that, they had broken down the segregation in the theaters in Colorado Springs. Mrs. Harrison did that. She even let them take her to jail. You see what I'm saying? There were things happening in the schools. My sister Kimball had a lot to do with it. With her work with the Democrats and her political influence and so forth to break down all these
Harrison?
things. Yeah. Juanita Harrison.
H-A-I-R-S-T-O-N.
Uh-huh.
In
Yeah.
relationship to Jackie Harrison?
No, I don't think so. No, Bertie Harrison was her daughter. But no. No, I
Okay.
don't think so. Anyway, so where's my resume? So this is what I think are the high points in my life. Okay. I got my college, after I went back teaching school, I got my master's degree at Colorado College, and then I came to California after 10 years of teaching in Colorado Springs. I came to California, and I came here to go to the University of California, Berkeley, to work on a PhD. That's the reason I came. And I was here, I don't know, how long was I here? Just a few days, actually. I was here one summer, actually, working on my PhD. And the Berkeley school system, at that time, was under the control of white people. The administration was. And when I went to get a job, I thought, well, I'm going to try to get a job and see if I could just stay here and finish that. Because I really didn't want to go back to Colorado Springs. I wanted to stay someplace else because Colorado Springs, because all these things were still in my heart. You follow me? And they weren't promoting me the way I should have been promoted. I was their first black teacher, but you know, they always have anger against that first one. You understand what I'm saying? It's always hard on them. So they began to take it out on Percy, my child, and I said, let's get out of here. And I didn't like the situation with Percy's father either. There were several things that were negative. I said, let's go someplace else, let's try. So I decided then I would go out here and get my PhD and see what happened from there. And I decided to try to get a job, so I went to Berkeley And they fell all over me. I'm going to be very frank with you. They said, please take our job, you know. Because at that time they had started to think about integrating the schools in Berkeley. And here was a black woman with all of these credentials and so forth and so on. And so I got a job very, very easily. And I was thrilled because it paid me so much more than I would get in Colorado Springs, quite a bit more. And I thought I could go ahead on the PhD, but I really wasn't caring too much about getting a PhD. It was terribly difficult, and I didn't try to finish. I got about 16 hours, I think. And I didn't try to finish because I had to take care of Percy. He was having a hard time adjusting. A little kid comes out of a little bitty town where everybody knew us, you know, and he comes to this urban environment, so forth and so on. Anyway, my experience has been this. So, I worked at Berkeley until I retired. And then when I retired, I didn't have enough money actually to make it because I had such a short time of teaching at Berkeley. You know, only 17 years. You're supposed to have at least 20, 25 years. And so the retirement check was, you know, the retirement pay was very small. So I thought I would try to supplement it, and I began to sell securities. Okay. And then I retired from that, and here I am. And I, now I have for, let's see, since 1980, let's see, about 1989 or 1990, I stopped selling securities. And what I've done now is sing with my church choir. And of course, as a part of that choir, in 1990, we went to Europe, and we toured Germany and Italy singing. We are Catholic, and we culminated it with an audience with Pope John Paul II, and singing Mass at St. Peter's Cathedral in Rome. And we went to the Vatican and had an audience with Pope John Paul II, and we saw all of these beautiful things that you see in Europe, you know, if you are looking for those things. Beautiful churches that you wouldn't imagine, with all kinds of stuff on the ceiling that you just wouldn't imagine. I have some pictures, but we're not going to take time to show those. And I did have a chance. Well, I was sitting here and Pope was sitting there, just that close. And everybody tried to touch him if they could, you know, figure they might have some special blessings. I got my touch in, believe me. And it was that close. But this was, I guess, probably the high point of my whole life, was to have a chance to go over there in that capacity, because I don't think I'd ever had a chance to go to Europe or any place else. I never had a chance before, except to go to Hawaii twice. So after coming home from Europe, I still sing with the choir, but I'm getting to the point now where I'm just getting a little bit too old for some of these things, so I probably will drop out. But that's been my life so far. Now, the things I should point out, as I said before, was this University of California PhD program, Hayward State University. By the way, when you get admitted to the University of California in the PhD program, it's no small thing. So, you know, they just don't admit just everybody. So I had a lot of things to get admitted on. One of these things was this. I had this publication in the Journal of Music Education. I was a music teacher, and a classroom music teacher, plus I did classroom work too in social studies, and plus I did, you know, just ordinary grades, 5th and 6th grades. This is what I have. So you'll see it. All right.
Can you get that?
Sure.
All right, let me.
Okay. That's okay. That's
You got the front.
That's okay. That's enough.
Here.
That's enough.
Get this.
That's enough. He got my name. He got my name, whoever it was. Yeah. Nina Speller. Yeah. I prepared. I was in educational psychology. What I was going to do at the University of California was improve my tests that I devised for assessing talent of children in music at an early age. And this I was in. And I guess it's still probably in the Who's Who. I don't know
Mm.
what they have in there. I wanted to show you that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we all did things. We all did things. But this is what I did. Okay. Here it is, way down there. Now, I don't know if you can get that, but you see there's Nina Stroud Pellerin. Okay. There I am. Got it. Got it. Okay. Now, let me finish this quickly because I want to go to Rosie and Bobby and we'll be finished. Experience. Wait a minute. Hayward State University, Educational Administration and Accounting. General Office Clerk, Benz Express. Professional musician, Chicago, Illinois, and Colorado. Teaching, Chicago and Colorado Springs. Teacher, Colorado Springs and Berkeley Public Schools. Insurance, real estate, and securities salesman, Bay Area, California. And then I worked as a representative of Mutual Fund Associates, of Parallel Security, of Harris Realty, and Investment Fund Associates, and I ended up with Protective Investors of America. Okay, citations. High school honor student, awarded 4-year honor scholarship to the university. A mortgage scholarship awarded by the University of California, Colorado. Teaching fellowship awarded by Hampton Institute. Listed in the Who's Who of American Women. Publications, the master's theses, and the Pellerin Music Achievement Test for elementary grades 5 and 6 in the Colorado Journal of Research in Music Education. Licenses, State of Colorado, Graduate Life Teaching Certificate, State of California, Life Teaching Diploma, and so forth and so on, and so forth and so on, so forth and so on. Okay? Mama said she wanted to have a preacher, somebody who could play the piano, and a teacher. She got them. All three of them. Now go on to Rosa. Who's next? That's me. Now let's get this off, and let's get Rosa on. Okay? Let's Rosa's dear heart. Let's get her on. I'm trying to do too much at once here. Well, then,
No.
I want to do it all today.
Oh, we're going to get it all today.
We are. I'm almost through. Oh, almost finished. Here's Rosa. Hers is small, but it's got just as much on it as Lulu has on hers. But I'm not going to try to read it all to you. I'm just going to paraphrase her. I want to show you this so I won't forget it. This is Rosa. Okay?
Yes, that is, yeah.
And this is me. This is my mother. This is Jack,
Yeah.
Albert, Effie, and Bobby. I want to leave this on
Do it again.
because that's the only way you're going to see Bobby.
Name everybody
Bobby.
again.
That's Bobby.
Okay, Rosa,
Rosa,
Nina,
Mom,
Mother,
Jack,
Jack,
Ben, Effie, and Bobby.
no,
These other people are the landlord and the landlady of Ben. This is where he lives
this is in Chicago.
in Maywood, yeah. And these girls are just friends who were helping to serve this lovely dinner that she had for us. When Rosa brought my mother back to Illinois to see her people. This was after my father died. We all chipped in money, and Rosa took Mama on a train ride back to Illinois to her home. And she got to see her people.
What year was this?
I can't remember the year. Father died in 1966. It must have been about
No,
1968.
your father didn't die in 66. This is 1941.
Oh, he died in 1938, excuse me.
This is 41. My God.
Yeah. And we all went there to see Mom. I think I was in Hampton, I think. Okay. So we all went to that could. You see Lulu's missing. And
Yeah,
Kimball,
that's neat.
Kimball was dead. So there you have the pictures of Rosa, and Bobby is the only good, decent picture I have of her. So you'll need to see that. Now, this is Rosa as she is now. With me with Effie. Effie's over here. This is just before Effie died.
Slide it over just a little bit, please.
Just before Effie died. Got it?
Effie.
And this is Lulu. Okay. Now this is Leonard Pollard, Lulu's husband, who helped her with the newsletters and all the rest. Okay? I mean, not newsletters, but the publications that she makes. I still want to think I'm going to leave this up here, though, so we can get back to it. Okay? Now I'm going to move this. All right? Is it all right?